Have you ever been told by the person who gave birth to you that you're worth exactly $50,000? Have you ever heard your own mother negotiate your future like your property to be sold to the highest bidder? What if the woman who was supposed to protect you, who was supposed to love you unconditionally, decided that paying off her gambling debts was more important than your freedom, your education, your entire life? What if you were 22 years old with dreams and plans and potential, and suddenly you were being forced into a marriage with a stranger twice your age because your mother needed cash and you were the most valuable asset she had to sell? My name is Priya Sharma, and I'm 24 years old now. But 2 years ago, my mother tried to sell me into an arranged marriage for $50,000 so she could pay off her gambling debts and keep living the lifestyle she'd become addicted to. She signed contracts, accepted money, and planned my wedding to a 45-year-old businessman I'd never met, all without asking me once if this was what I wanted. She thought I'd be compliant, obedient, the good Indian daughter who does what her mother tells her without question. She was wrong. This is the story of how I escaped a forced marriage, exposed my mother's crimes, and made sure she faced consequences for trying to sell her own daughter like livestock. Let me start at the beginning, with the moment I realized my mother was capable of something I never thought any parent could do to their child. It was March 2022, and I was finishing my senior year at UCLA, studying computer science, planning to start a job at Google in the fall. I had my whole life mapped out. Graduation in June, starting work in August, moving into my own apartment in Mountain View, independence and career success and freedom. I'd worked hard for that future, had taken out student loans and worked part-time jobs and earned scholarships to make it possible despite coming from a family with very little money. My mother, Anjali, had raised me alone after my father died when I was 8. She'd worked as a real estate agent in the San Francisco Bay Area, making decent money during good years, struggling during bad ones. We'd always been close when I was younger. It was just the two of us against the world. But something changed in her when I went away to college. She started going to casinos more often, first just for entertainment, then more compulsively. Started taking bigger risks with money, making poor investment decisions, borrowing from friends and family. By the time I was a senior in college, she was deeply in debt from gambling losses she'd hidden from everyone, including me. I didn't know any of this when she called me that March evening and said she needed to talk to me about something important. I drove up to her house in Fremont that weekend, expecting maybe she needed help with some paperwork or wanted to discuss my graduation plans. Instead, I walked into a conversation that would change my entire life. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a man I'd never seen before, an older Indian man, probably in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit. My mother looked nervous, but also excited in a way that immediately made me uneasy. "Priya, beta, come sit down," she said, using the Hindi term of endearment that now makes my skin crawl. "This is Mr. Kapoor. He's a family friend who's helping me with some business matters, and he has a proposal for us." I sat down cautiously, looking between them, trying to understand what was happening. Mr. Kapoor smiled at me in a way that felt predatory, assessing, like I was merchandise he was considering purchasing. "Your mother has told me so much about you. UCLA graduate, computer science, very accomplished. My nephew Rajesh is looking for a wife. Good Indian girl, educated, from a respectable family. He's a successful businessman, 45 years old, never married, ready to settle down. Your mother thinks you two would be an excellent match." My brain couldn't process what he was saying fast enough. "I'm sorry, what? A match? I'm not looking to get married. I have a job starting in August. I have plans." My mother reached across the table to take my hand, and I pulled away instinctively. Priya, listen, this is an incredible opportunity. Rajesh is very successful, very well off. He owns a chain of hotels. You would want for nothing. And the arrangement would be very beneficial for our family as well. What arrangement? Mom, what are you talking about? Mr. Kapoor pulled out a folder of papers. It's quite simple. Rajesh is prepared to offer a substantial dowry for the marriage, $50,000, which would go to your mother as is traditional in arranged marriages. In exchange, you would marry Rajesh, move to his home in Los Angeles, and become part of a very wealthy, respected family. $50,000. That's what this was about. My mother was trying to sell me for $50,000. No, I said, standing up so fast my chair fell backward. Absolutely not. This is insane. You're trying to arrange a marriage without even asking me for money? Priya, don't be dramatic, my mother said, and her tone was sharper now. This is how things are done in our culture. Parents arrange marriages. It's not selling, it's tradition. And you should be grateful that someone like Rajesh is interested in you. Do you know how many girls would love this opportunity? Then let them have it. I'm not interested. I have my own life, my own plans. You can't just decide I'm getting married to some 45-year-old stranger for cash. Mr. Kapoor's expression hardened. Your mother has already accepted the offer. The contracts are signed. The wedding is scheduled for July after your graduation. Everything is arranged. I looked at my mother in horror. You already agreed without even telling me? How could you do this? Because I'm your daughter and I know what's best for you, she said, and I could hear desperation under the anger in her voice. You think you know everything, going off to your fancy college, planning your fancy career, but you're still my child, and you'll do as I say. This marriage is happening, Priya. You need to accept it. I left, grabbed my purse, and walked out while my mother called after me, drove back to UCLA in a state of shock and fury, called my best friend Maya and told her everything. She was as horrified as I was. That's illegal, Maya said. You can't force someone to marry. You're an adult. She can't sign contracts on your behalf for something like this. But what if she already took the money? What if they try to sue her? What if this destroys everything? Priya, your mom is trying to literally sell you into a marriage. You need to protect yourself, not worry about her consequences. She was right, but it took me a few days to fully accept it. I kept thinking maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe my mom would come to her senses and realize what she was doing was wrong. Instead, she kept calling, kept insisting this was happening, kept saying I was being ungrateful and disrespectful for not accepting this generous offer. I started researching, found out that forced marriage is illegal in California, that you can't sign contracts on behalf of adult children for marriage, that accepting money for arranging a marriage could potentially be considered human trafficking, depending on the circumstances. My mother had stepped into serious legal territory without understanding the implications. I also found out about Rajesh Kapoor, the man I was supposedly going to marry, 45 years old, never married, owned a chain of budget hotels that had multiple violations for labor practices and safety issues. His family was wealthy, but had a reputation for being controlling and traditional. There were rumors online about Rajesh having had previous arranged marriage attempts fall through, though no details about why. The more I learned, the more terrified I became. This wasn't just my mother making a bad decision. This was her putting me in actual danger for money. She kept pressuring me through April and May, said I was ruining the family honor by refusing, said I owed her for everything she sacrificed to raise me, said if I didn't go through with this, she'd be sued for the $50,000 she'd already spent paying off her debts, and she'd lose everything. She tried guilt, manipulation, threats, everything to make me comply. Meanwhile, the Kapoor family started contacting me directly. Rajesh added me on Facebook, started messaging me about how he was looking forward to our marriage, how he'd take care of me, how I wouldn't have to work if I didn't want to. The messages became more frequent and more possessive. He started calling me my wife in messages, even though we'd never met in person. Started making plans for where we'd live, how many children we'd have, talking about me like I was already his property. I blocked him on everything, but the messages kept coming through other accounts, through family members. The Kapoor family had apparently paid the money and considered the deal done. They were treating me like I'd been purchased. I graduated from UCLA in June, but the joy of accomplishment was overshadowed by the nightmare of what was supposedly happening in July. My mother had actually scheduled a wedding venue, had hired caterers, had sent invitations to relatives in India. She was proceeding like I'd agreed to everything, like my objections didn't matter. That's when I decided I needed to do more than just refuse. I needed to expose what she was doing and make sure it stopped permanently. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of Rajesh's messages talking about me like property, recordings of conversations with my mother where she openly admitted to accepting money for arranging the marriage, bank records I got through online access showing the $50,000 deposit from the Kapoors and then immediate payments out to casinos and creditors. I built a case file showing exactly what was happening. I also reached out to a lawyer through UCLA's legal aid services, explained the situation. The lawyer was horrified and confirmed that what my mother was doing was potentially criminal. This could be considered human trafficking under California law, she told me. Receiving money to arrange the marriage of an adult who hasn't consented is trafficking. The Kapoor family could also be charged with attempted forced marriage. You need to report this to the police. What will happen to my mother if I do? She'll likely be arrested and charged. Priya, I understand she's your mother, but she's trying to force you into a marriage for money. That's a serious crime. You have to protect yourself. I struggled with that decision for weeks. Despite everything, she was still my mother, the woman who raised me, who'd worked hard to provide for me after my father died, who'd been my whole family for most of my life. But she was also the woman who decided I was worth $50,000, who sold me to strangers, who valued her gambling debts more than my freedom and safety. The decision was made for me when Rajesh showed up at my apartment in Westwood in late June. I don't know how he got my address, but there he was, a middle-aged man I'd never met in person, standing at my door saying we needed to talk about our upcoming wedding. I don't know you, and I'm not marrying you, I said through the door, not opening it. Whatever arrangement my mother made, I didn't agree to it. Please leave. Your mother accepted the money. We have a contract. You're obligated to honor it. I'm not obligated to anything. I didn't sign anything, and you can't force me to marry you. His voice turned darker. You're being very disrespectful. Your mother assured us you would be obedient. We've paid good money for this marriage, and you will honor it, one way or another. The threat was clear. I called the police while he was still standing outside my door. Told them a strange man was at my apartment making threats related to a forced marriage situation. They arrived quickly, questioned Rajesh, told him to leave and not return. But they also took a report, and that report started the official investigation. Once the police were involved, everything moved quickly. They contacted the lawyer I'd been working with, reviewed the evidence I'd gathered, brought in the FBI because potential human trafficking crosses state lines. Within a week, they'd built a case and made arrests. My mother was arrested in early July, 1 week before the scheduled wedding that was never going to happen, charged with human trafficking, attempted forced marriage, and fraud. Rajesh and his uncle Mr. Kapoor were also arrested on similar charges, plus conspiracy and attempting to coerce an adult into marriage. The arrest made local news. Bay Area woman arrested for attempting to force daughter into marriage for money. The story spread through the Indian community quickly, scandalous and shocking. Relatives called me both to offer support and to condemn me for destroying the family honor by reporting my own mother. I didn't care what they thought. I'd stopped a forced marriage and exposed a crime. If that destroyed some abstract concept of family honor, then that honor wasn't worth having. My mother tried to reach out from jail, left voicemails crying, saying she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes, but I was ruining her life by pressing charges, that she'd only been trying to secure my future, to make sure I'd be taken care of, that I was ungrateful for not understanding the sacrifice she'd made. The sacrifice she'd made. She was in jail for trying to sell me, and she was talking about her sacrifice? I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I started my job at Google in August as planned. Moved to Mountain View, started my career and my independent adult life. The life my mother had tried to take from me for $50,000. The legal case took months. My mother's lawyer tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, that arranged marriages are cultural tradition, that she'd never intended for force me into anything. But the evidence was overwhelming. The messages from Rajesh treating me like property, the recordings of my mother saying I had to comply whether I wanted to or not, the bank records showing she'd taken money for arranging the marriage, the testimony about the wedding she'd planned without my consent. The prosecution offered a plea deal. My mother pleaded guilty to coercion and fraud charges in exchange for dropping the human trafficking charge. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison and 5 years probation, ordered to return the $50,000 she'd taken from the Kapoors, and required to attend gambling addiction treatment. Rajesh and Mr. Kapoor also took plea deals. They got probation and fines, had to publicly admit to attempting to arrange a forced marriage, and were prohibited from attempting similar arrangements in the future. The Kapoor family tried to sue my mother for the return of their money, which she didn't have because she'd spent it all paying gambling debts. They'd bought a wife who didn't exist and had nothing to show for it but criminal records. I testified at my mother's sentencing hearing, stood in front of a judge, and explained what it felt like to learn your mother valued gambling more than your freedom, to be told you were obligated to marry a stranger because she'd accepted money, to have your entire future planned without your consent, to be treated like property rather than a human being. My mother didn't see me as her daughter in that moment. She saw me as an asset she could sell. That's not cultural tradition. That's not looking out for my best interest. That's trafficking. And she needs to face consequences for it, so she understands you can't sell human beings, even if they're your own children. The judge agreed. My mother was taken into custody to begin serving her sentence. I didn't visit her in prison. She wrote letters that I read but didn't respond to. She talked about being sorry, about understanding now what she'd done wrong, about wanting a relationship when she got out. But the trust was too broken. You can't come back from trying to force your daughter into marriage for cash. She got out after serving 12 months, reduced for good behavior, tried to call me, to reach out through relatives, to rebuild something. I declined every attempt. She'd made her choice when she signed those contracts and accepted that money. Now she had to live with the consequences of treating her daughter like merchandise. I'm 24 now, 2 years past the wedding that never happened. I've been promoted twice at Google, bought my own condo, built a life I'm proud of. I'm dating someone I actually chose, someone who respects me as an equal partner rather than property to be owned. I have friends and career success and freedom. My mother is somewhere in the Bay Area, working a low-paying job, dealing with the consequences of her criminal record and destroyed reputation. The Indian community that was so important to her has largely ostracized her. Her gambling problem is supposedly under control through mandated treatment, but the debt remains and she's paying it off slowly. I don't feel guilty about what happened to her. She's facing consequences for crimes she actually committed. She tried to sell her daughter into forced marriage for gambling debts. That's not a cultural misunderstanding or a parental mistake. That's human trafficking. People sometimes ask if I'll ever forgive her, ever rebuild the relationship. The answer is, I don't know. Right now, 2 years out, the answer is no. The betrayal was too deep, the violation too fundamental. She was supposed to be the one person who'd always protect me, and instead she tried to trade me for $50,000. Maybe someday I'll be able to have some kind of relationship with her again. Maybe therapy and time will heal enough that we can have supervised conversations. But right now, I'm focused on the life I built for myself, the future I saved by refusing to be sold. This story isn't about cultural differences or generation gaps or family expectations. It's about a mother who valued money more than her daughter's freedom and faced legal consequences for that choice. It's about refusing to be property, refusing to be sold, refusing to accept that someone else gets to decide your future because they gave birth to you. I escaped a forced marriage by exposing it. I got justice by reporting crimes. I protected myself by refusing to be compliant. And I'm living proof that you don't have to accept what your parents plan for you when those plans involve trafficking you for money. You can fight back, expose it, and build the life you actually want instead of the one someone tried to sell you into. My mother sold me for $50,000. I made sure she spent a year in prison for it. And now I have the freedom and life she tried to take from me, while she lives with the consequences of treating her daughter like property. That's justice. That's what happens when you try to force someone into marriage for money. That's what you deserve when you value gambling debts more than your own child's freedom and safety.